right, guys. Thank you for joining us. Mark, I did shoot you a request as well. Leo, sending you a request. All right, future lucky guy, welcome. I think we got the space figured out now. That Starlink over in New Zealand kills it for Mark over there all the time.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah, yeah.
Is my volume good?
Yeah, that sounds great to me. Everybody else down there can hear him okay? Give a thumbs up. Let's hit.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, I can hear
Yep.
both of you really clear.
Great.
Yeah, we got with thumbs up. Nice. I think Mark might have to drop out, close everything, and come back and rejoin. So, how Psy Optimus Prime? Which should we go with? Future Lucky Guy or Psy Optimus Prime?
Whatever you want. I have like 1,000 accounts. So I'm one of those truly anonymous crypto people. I never came out as a human for the entirety of the 10 years I've been into crypto. There was a big push in 2017 for everybody to come out of their anonymous accounts, and you'll see that if you go through the timeline, you'll see that in 2017, many people like doxed themselves, like, oh, this is who I really am. It was kind of like it wasn't just like an ego move. It was also like pressure from other people in crypto to be like, oh, hey, come out as not anonymous so that people trust us, you know. And I was like, that's nonsense. I'm not, I'm not doing that.
All right. Looks like Mark is having some problems connecting. We'll see if he continues to try to get in here. Thank you, everybody who has joined the new space link. Thank you very much. Please go down into that little right-hand corner. Click that bubble down there. Please repost the space link so we can try to get the room filled. If you don't mind me asking, whereabouts are you located at? Are you in the U.S. or are you overseas?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could tell from my accent. I don't want to say outright, but uh
You can just say the U.S. if you're comfortable with that.
yeah, that's
I'm
fine.
in
I, I
Chicago myself,
I'm from
so
the US. I'm from the US.
yeah, yeah. I figured your American accent is pretty clean.
Yeah, yeah. Very American.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. So you were talking about 2017. So how long have you been in the crypto space then?
I entered, well, like, it's funny because I heard about Bitcoin and knew about Bitcoin, even researched a little bit about Bitcoin in 2010, but I didn't actually enter like the space until 2013.
Wow, so
Um
you've been in a long time then.
yeah. Although, as everybody, everybody has regrets that they didn't get it earlier. I mean, 2010, like that would have been phenomenal, right?
Dude, I actually I'm gonna date myself here a little bit too, and I remember hearing about Bitcoin when it was like a fraction of a penny. I
Right, yeah.
oh my god, I can't imagine how my life would have been different if I had bought something. But although you know what I probably would have done, as I probably would have bought it, I would have stuck it into a wallet and then lost
Right.
it.
Or you would have left it on like an exchange not thinking it was a big deal. And basically there's zero exchanges since then that have remained open. I mean, I think Kraken is the longest
Yeah.
reliable exchange.
Yeah. Is I don't even use Kraken to be honest with you.
Most people don't. I
Yeah.
like I would recommend Kraken though. There's only two exchanges that I would recommend to like my friends, and it's
Oh,
Coinbase and Kraken.
okay. And what leads you to that decision of those particular two exchanges? Isn't Kraken aren't they trying to go for like a banking license kind of thing situation?
I think they might already have it. I could be wrong. I'm not up to date on that. But yeah, they've been. working with U.S. regulators for a long time. I know they recently kind of capitulated and gave up a lot of data to the IRS.
Yeah. Yeah, that they've been going after them, right? Didn't they settle and then they went back after them again, kind of thing?
I think so. It's been a big back and forth.
Right.
So,
Over the staking aspect, right? And all that kind of malarkey, I guess. If I understood what I was reading correctly.
well, it's more than that. It's I want to say it was like if you did more than $20,000 worth of transactions in any given year, dating back until I think 20. Don't quote me on this. I think it's like 2014 or something. So,
Interesting. I wonder what made them decide that particular uh 20,000 limit time frame, and then I mean, no, I guess they must have their reasons. I don't fully understand it. Um
same.
yeah, I'm not sure that anybody understands why the SEC does what it does at times, considering, the debacle that they pretty much have put themselves into with enforcing, regulation rather than guiding it, right, and helping to weed out the bad players. I mean, where else in the wonderful U.S. can you have the SEC meeting with the founders of basically the owners, of FTX, and then watch FTX just crash and burn, right?
Yeah.
That's got to instill a lot of confidence in the American people. But now you see FTT token like taking off again. Like, we can go down the rabbit hole on that, but yeah, I mean, uh,
Well, I think that it just really goes back to how the market makers play this space, and basically like there's going to be zero retail like at the bottom of that, and so they probably just decided, hey, we can move it up and probably get a good cut of this retail at the
hmm
top, and dump it on them.
yeah, and I think that's something that we've talked a little bit about financial things, getting people the right mindset that mentally from the standpoint of and I use the adage, when you go chasing big green candles, you get big red dildos. It's like, don't chase the green. You should have already had your position before then, so that you can be selling the green candles and taking your profits, right? Which is something that I had to learn the hard way. I will admit that there are lessons to be learned when you get into trading the markets and watching, what you think is your portfolio going to continue to go up. And unfortunately, things don't always go up. They go up and they go back down, and then they go back up and they go back down. So,
Absolutely. Actually, to add to your point, uh, it, so Barry, Silbert or Silbert, I don't know how he pronounces it, is known to be like one of the best crypto traders on like, the heavy hitter end, and he's down there on his latest report that I read, and it's probably not completely up to date, probably within the last couple months. He's down 39 million on his Zcash investment. So it doesn't matter how much of an insider you might or might not be. Um, you're gonna have hits, and you're gonna have bad ones, and so don't get. I would recommend anybody listening to not get down about your losses. Just be optimistic. Look to the next
yeah, take it as
opportunity.
I would say take it as a learning experience, right? And say, okay, well, what was the reason I decided to get into the market at that particular point in time? Um, and what lessons can I learn from this to minimize it the next time I decide I'm going to, enter the market? Um, I know that we recently, Mark had the community, he posted a trading class in the community. Part of what we do is a lot of upskilling people to educate them, get them understanding the market, how to do some basic technical analysis, so they start understanding things on a deeper level as they go and learn to trade. Or maybe it's a daily basis, maybe it's a swing trade, maybe it's just a long term trade. But I think one of the biggest lessons is learning to trade it, not date it, so that you can become emotionally unattached to be able to take your profits later on, right? Because the whole idea is to be able to make money. Whether you're short term, mid term, long term investment holder, it's becoming unemotional about it is the hardest thing, and it is tough. I will say this has been an arduous bear market this year, watching my portfolio go down because I didn't know enough information about what I was doing at the time I entered into a lot of it. Now I have a much greater understanding of the technical analysis, and trying to disassociate the emotions from it. But I do see Leo with his hand up. I know that we have Mark up here now as well. So Mark, hopefully you are able to hear us okay. And I do want to go ahead and pass the mic over to Leo real quick, and then Mark, we'll get into some questions because I know you probably got a ton of great questions as well for our guest today. So Leo.
Yeah, the greed, the emotion, the thrill of the bull, everything can be pretty much combated by, like you said, trade analysis. There's 4, 5, 6 different tests via charts that you can put it on. Should I buy? Should I sell? And when all of them say the same thing, you set up your loss, you set up your profit, and then you hit the trigger, you set it, you forget it, and let the computer do the rest, and don't look at it.
Yeah, thank you, Leo. I think that's all about setting up your trades. But Mark, I know you probably got a bunch of questions. I'm glad to see you have made it up here. I'd like to go ahead and pass the mic over to you and the guest, and let's get into some deep questions, man.
Hey guys, hopefully I'm coming through. Am I coming through?
Yeah.
Oh, thank goodness. Yeah, apologies to the community as well as Optimus. Those who know, it's a bit hit and miss here in New Zealand with the spaces. But yeah, just to give, I guess, a little bit of a context to how I met Optimus Prime and why I asked him to come on. So I was going through some spaces, and I'm always looking for interesting things to learn about, and that's why I go into spaces, is trying to learn things. And I ended up in a space with Optimus, as well as another gentleman by the name of Rhett. And Rhett was I think he's like a quantum mechanics, physics, super brain. And then Optimus was like also talking a lot about some OG stuff with Bitcoin. But it was also some really interesting stuff about, for those of you who believe in, some of the stuff and theories around ancient civilizations with Thoth and the Emerald Tablets and different stuff like this. So I just found it incredibly interesting. And, often these spaces when we come on are like just dead boring. So I think this is going to be a really interesting space. And I just want to, thank you for joining us. So Optimus. Cheers, bro.
Absolutely. Yeah, man. That was an awesome night. We talked about all kinds of interesting topics. It was a good time.
Absolutely. But so I do apologize if I cut in or out. I may disappear. So maybe I'll get some questions out first. But let's just, anybody who does have questions, because I think it's not often you get to speak to people who've been involved in Bitcoin since 2013. And also, it's not very often that you get to speak to, I guess, a 32nd degree Freemason. Not that I know what that is. But let's get going. So perhaps, Optimus, could you just explain what I mean? I've actually been invited to a Freemason meeting and got invited into the group or the fraternity. I declined purely because I was too busy at the time, but I found it quite interesting. I was just wondering if you could, from your experience, like what is the Freemasons, what is Freemasonry, and if we perhaps start with that.
Yeah, so if you asked 3 different Masons what Freemasonry was, you'd get 3 different answers. It's one of those things. But it's definitely a fraternity. It definitely has like a uh how do you say it? Like a mystique to it. Like it's kind of mysterious. Um but yeah, so it's definitely a fraternity. If you're into philosophy or hermeticism, then it might mean more to you than just being a fraternity. Some people call it religious. Some Masons deny that it's religious. I would say if you're familiar with the Bible, um, it's going to mean a little more to you. I'm not saying that it is religious or that there's a lot of allegory involved and a lot of ancient magic with a CK, if you will, involved. It actually is kind of interesting how the crypto community and like meme coins, etc. They really touch on mimesis, and that's uh, it's sort of like a metaphysical subconscious aspect of allegory and imagery that that we don't see much today in any other field, in my personal opinion. And this is why I actually love meme coins. And if you take so it's more than just like a goofy, like, oh hey, look at me, like we're making a joke. Like it's a little deeper than that. Um, I don't really know how to explain that. um, Other than like, then maybe you should look into mimesis in general, mimetics, symbolism, the power of symbols, and magic. Magic is sort of a with a CK, not talking magic with a C. Um, it's sort of like you're subconsciously eh, I don't know if you ever heard of the term synesthesia. It's when you mix two uh I'm on the spot now, so of course I'm losing my words here. But it's like you mix two feelings, like for example, you can see like the color green might taste like a strawberry or whatever. Like you're mixing two what's the damn word? Anyway, you're mixing two freaking feelings together that don't necessarily relate. Like, so if you take like a psychedelic, for example, like people report this on like mushrooms or acid or whatever. Like you might be able to like you're listening to music and you might taste it, or you're saying a word and you might feel it, or like your friend's face turns green. Like is there a deeper meaning there that we haven't explored in science? And I would say yes, but I guess meme coins sort of touch on that a little bit, and I guess it's sort of hard for me to explain. But the power of memes and the power, like, so if you take Doge in 2021 or whatever, or I guess people call it Doge these days, but if you take Doge and the powerful pump it had, it's a really good example of this, where Doge, if you actually look at the Doge chart and you bring it up, it's actually outperformed Bitcoin since it was created. And the reason um, I would put forth is because it really takes hold of that magic with a CK, as I said, um, in which it's easy to share. It's not so dogmatic. Obviously, the people on the outside are going to be a little dogmatic, especially like the center bell curve people. Like this isn't very serious, etc. Um, I'm not here to like shill Doge. I actually, I actually don't own any. Just to throw that out there. Um, but it just shows the power of the meme coins in that there's something a little bit deeper. It's not just like a joke, you know. Um, because people are putting their weight behind it. It's a little different. People vote with their money. Um, so yeah, go ahead. I don't know. I'm kind of rambling here.
Nah, that's cool, man. It's just sort of good to hear how your brain thinks, and some of these things are like brand new to me. But so the 32nd degree component of Freemasonry, I mean, I have a basic understanding. There's levels. Can you explain, what the levels are? I believe there's a bit of secrecy around it, but whatever you can talk about, can you tell us about the levels within Freemasonry?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of secrecy around it. There's a lot of things I can't like say out loud, of course, but it, that's yeah. So you're talking about the levels. So like a third degree Mason is a master Mason. So on the base level, like that's really the highest level, what they call Blue Lodge. So like the first three tiers are the first 3 degrees in Masonry. And once you hit the third degree, like you're a master Mason. And then it branches off into other secret societies that you can join, and that's how you get to the 32nd degree, for example. And yeah, I don't know if that explains your question.
Cool. Without going into too many, because you hear positive and negative things, right? But I think most of us here, a lot of us here are veterans and supporters of veterans, that we understand the way things can be manipulated through delivery of information. But would you say that Freemasonry is a force for good? Is it entirely a force for good, or is there some kind of dark aspects to it?
That's an interesting question. I think this also ties into Hermeticism, and I think that Hermeticism and the Kabbalah and things like that. Uh, uh, so Masonry, in my personal opinion, is sort of like is Hermetic. It's Kabbalistic. It's
Could you define that word? Because I don't know what it means.
Hermeticism.
Yeah.
So
What does that mean?
Hermeticism is like following the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus, who is basically it's like Thoth, but like in the Greek canon, or in the Western canon, I guess I should say. Because so when the Greeks discovered Thoth, when they interacted with the Egyptians, they sort of mixed their own Hermes with Thoth, and they called it Hermes Trismegistus, or Hermes Thrice Great. And you'll hear titles like that in Masonry. Um, and I think that that's one thing that you might not understand even as a Mason, that there's like something a little bit deeper going on, that there is a Hermeticism within the lodge, which is the teachings of Hermes. Um, I don't know how to say this without giving up any secrets, but I'm gonna try. So there's hints that that Pythagoras was a Freemason, and also actually, the last time we spoke, we talked about Thales and how his Thales theorem uses the square and compass. Um, and I don't know if it's the first known algorithm that uses that, but it basically points to the idea that he's also a Freemason, or that he's a Hermeticist. Pythagoras was known to have his own like secret society. Um, I'm trying to remember what the question was. Yeah, I ramble a lot, and I've had a lot of caffeine, so if I shoot off in like the wrong direction, just go ahead and steer my ship.
Yeah.
All
No,
good, man.
There's so much to talk about within like that this category, and it's something that nobody talks about. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I sort of want to give people I know a lot of people will have heard of Freemasonry, but some haven't. So I sort of want to give a layer platform, but let's get into, some more crypto specific stuff. But
Mark,
just trying to tie it back in.
Mark, can I jump in here real quick? Because this is, this is something that I really do find fascinating, and I kind of want to touch on what are your thoughts with the symbolism revolving around numerology, and that can tie us back into where kind of Mark was going with crypto, because I do follow a gentleman that talks a lot with dates, numerology of dates, master numbers, master creator, master destroyer, like 22, 33.
Hmm.
Even looking at the number 11, instead of looking at it as 1 1, looking at it as 2 1s, 21, 2 1s, right? So this stuff like really gets me down the rabbit hole, and I love seeing how the numbers start to tie back by using a Chaldean, to looking at these numbers, and things like that. How heavy do you get into that aspect, and your experience with numbers and numerology and the symbolism tying back in, if you can?
So have you ever heard of the movie Pi? Uh, I don't know if you heard me. Have you heard of the movie Pi?
Yep.
I have.
Yep.
Have you seen it?
I think I have, but I am terrible with remembering movies themselves. So I will be honest.
Yeah, so they touch on the Kabbalah in that, and they touch on how in the Hebrew alphabet um they that like each letter has like a number connotated with it. So that might be interesting to you. So as far as numerology goes and modern numerology, I mean, I gotta be honest with you, I don't believe in any of that. But there's definitely a lot of interesting things that go on with numbers. And it- um, so I would say also one of the deep teachings of the philosophical school that we were talking about, that I was talking about with Mark, that that dates back to Thales and Socrates and Plato and Aristotle in that in that lineage of that philosophical school. They do touch on how important it is to know math, to know astronomy, to know plant physiology, um, to know chemistry, which back then they called alchemy. Um, and how to bring them together, sort of like a polymath would, and relate each one. And the example that I guess I'd give to you is the story of Thales using the first example of options trading. So this is interesting. So there's a story where Thales was being hailed as like a great philosopher in ancient Greece, and so some guy came up to him and said, "Well, hey, how come if you're so smart, why aren't you rich?" So he said, "Oh, give me like 5 years or whatever, and I'll be rich." And and so he took the challenge, and using his knowledge of astronomical forces on plant physiology, he figured out that one year there would be a huge olive harvest. So he went around to all the olive presses um, that normally rent out to people who pick the olives or whatnot, and he offered them all a certain amount of money before the season started. And he said, "If I give you this money now, will you let me rent out your machines for the rest of the harvest?" So that's what he did, and he went around and made a fortune because that year there was a massive harvest. And if I could give you a an example of how you, maybe somebody that's smart enough could profit off of something like this, even in modern day times, there's pretty interesting cycles that go on in nature. Like there's there's cicadas in North America that they lay their eggs underground, and every 17 years those eggs will hatch and the cicadas come out, and they also eat specific, if you go into their diet, you'll figure out the specific plants they eat, and maybe you can make a bet there. Um, Another example would be, I believe it's every 75 years in there's an Asian country. I believe it's on an island, but I'm not entirely sure. But there's a place in Asia where every 75 years there's a huge um, rush of rats that comes through and eats everything. It's kind of like the locusts in like the Bible or whatever, how they come through and eat everything, cause a famine. So there's this massive wave of rats every 75 years or something like that, um, because of the way that this plant grows and it produces a massive amount of its fruit or whatever it is. Um, and so it causes the rat population to grow exponentially. And so you do have these amazing cycles in nature that if you can connect them through all these disciplines, then you can as the alchemical quote goes, you can turn a base metal into gold. And so I was talking to Mark about this about a week ago, where people said alchemy is alchemy was just this nonsense thing where they would teach people um, that you can mess around with chemistry and eventually you'd make gold out of like whatever, out of some concoction. But that's not what it's about. It's about the allegory, which is which is the reason why alchemy started our modern science and started the modern science movement, because it was about tying the disciplines together, understanding the world around you, and using that to create profits in some way. And as you know, rising tides lift all ships. When you create profit, you help the people around you. And you also become more powerful.
Another person that was like the person that you explained was Fibonacci. He studied quite a bit of time on the rice paddies, and he found what you were saying about how it was going to decrease and increase, but it was going to go back to whatever goes down goes up and retraces, and he did that through the rice paddies.
That's an excellent example how math ties into the, plant physiology. That's a great example. So go ahead, fire me another question, I guess.
Um, so then, if we're talking about cycles, um, do you dig much into the 7 year cycles? Every 7 years is a Shemitah, or during the Shemitah, there's 7 year cycles, 50-year jubilee kind of thing. Do you guys get
Yeah.
into that aspect of things much?
You mean within masonry, you mean?
In masonry, and maybe not in masonry, but maybe even you personally.
Um, well, I definitely think that's interesting. So I have this sort of theory that um those sort of traditional cycles are sort of diluted from their original meanings. So most anything that you give me that was a modern theory or like a modern practice like that, I'd probably push against, excuse me, in my own belief system. Like I said, I'm not trying to like disparage any beliefs. Like that's not my idea at all. I'm just giving you my personal opinion. Um, it was an essay. So there's this book called the Zohar, um, which is sort of I guess you'd call it a text of Jewish mysticism, which was supposedly written by somebody in 1300 in Spain. But but the person who supposedly wrote it claims that he discovered these texts and just translated them from around the year. I want to say it's between negative 200 BC and 200 AD. Um, and that person's name is Shimon Bar Yochai, I believe. And it, it, um, so that book touches on how there are possibly feminine aspects of God and not just masculine aspects, because it would be sort of arrogant for us to think that there's uh that A, God has a gender, and B, that, and this doesn't tie into like the modern, LGBTQIA plus movement or anything. This is just specifically um this ancient text. So um which is sort of interesting because the Zohar goes through some examples of how how we don't really know about God and how it could be just infinite, or as they say, the infinite. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know where I'm going with this. I sort of forgot.
Well,
Go
well,
ahead.
when we start looking at this, is whatever anybody chooses to believe. Again, we're not. This isn't, like you said, to disparage any belief systems or anything, but are we actually God, broken down in its representation to experience this particular world, realm, whatever you want to call it, right? Are we in? Maybe we just don't understand the true power that we have to create. Um, I've been, I personally do some music production. I've seen some amazing videos on cymatics. The shapes that vibration and music creates. The fact that we can't even see sound, but you can see how it reacts with its environment.
Yeah,
We're-
so this is actually an excellent, like you're speaking my language here. This is an excellent point. So I would recommend to you a book called The Kabbalion. I was talking to Mark about this actually. And it actually goes into what you're talking about in a metaphysical sense where everything is actually a vibration. Everything is also in motion. Even the solids around you are just vibrations that we can comprehend on some sort of deeper level than just a
Mhm,
vibration.
mhm.
Um, so yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
And I find that fascinating because on a couple different things, because you were speaking about plants and understanding plants, the alchemy aspect of plants, right? Um, I have seen information about the effect of music on plant growth. Um, they were talking about the effects of birds when they start chirping before the actual sunrise, and it wakes up the plants um, for the day. So it's this very interesting thing that I'm seeing a lot of this stuff popping up on my timelines for me personally, and maybe it's just because maybe that I'm more open to that information, and so it just seems to appear for me.
Right.
Or
So
maybe it's just the mystical algorithms of the social media, but who knows, right? I mean, maybe there's
right.
a reason why I'm seeing it, you know?
Right. So also if you place like a plant next to a TV, it'll grow like pretty withered compared to like, with all that audio, all that noise. Um And yeah, so that's a interesting point you brought up there. Also, there's a book called The Secret Life of Water where a guy basically, I believe the experiment. I only read this like 10 years ago or something like that, maybe more. Maybe it was like 20 years ago. But I think the idea was he like shakes water up before he gives it to the plant, and it like and then he'll have one that's like serene water that he'll pour gently onto a plant. And I want to say that like the serene one grew much more vigorously. Also, since you brought up plants and the vibrations around them that affect them, I would say it's also pretty interesting that plant leaves follow the sun around and around its orbit.
Hmm.
Like they know where their energy is coming from in some sort of sense. And uh and so I was telling Mark also like a week ago that different spectrums of light will affect how a plant grows. A blue spectrum will cause a plant to grow like short and fat in a way, and a red spectrum of light will cause a plant to grow tall and skinny. And
Interesting.
yeah, it is interesting. Oh, at least I find it interesting.
Well, since we were kind of going on that in that direction, they were, it was watching them speaking about an experiment. I believe they did this in Russia, and this is back in like the mid '60s, where they actually had we were able to measure the energy of the plant, right? Using kind of like a almost like a what looked like a radar type thing, right? Where they could see the energy level of the plant. And then they had one of the scientists come in, and there was two plants next to each other. They were measuring the energy of one plant, and then the scientist went to the other plant and just started ripping all the leaves off of it, and the energy of the other
Mm,
plant completely changed.
mm,
And not only that, when that scientist left the room, the energy calmed down. But as soon as that scientist came back into the room, didn't do anything, the energy level went chaotic again of the plant that was there, as if it was able to sense that danger in its environment once again, even though that scientist had, just returned and didn't do anything, but it could recognize that they were there.
that's super interesting. Yeah,
Fucking fascinating
it
that these
is.
plants can sense that in their
Right.
environment.
There's also a plant that well, this is sort of off topic, but there's a plant that if you touch it, like it'll like shrivel a little. I don't know if you ever heard of that plant. My
Mm-mm.
sci my one of my science teachers in high school had one just to like show it off. And if you touched it, it would like curl up, like don't touch me.
It would react. Yeah.
Yeah, it would react.
Well, I find all this stuff really fascinating because in my personal opinion, there's much more to our world than what meets the eye. There's much more
Absolutely.
to it than what we've been led to believe. But
Also, there's much more to it than we can change that I think people don't understand. Like your will
Mhm.
is very powerful, and it might you might feel powerless sometimes, but we really are incredibly powerful.
Okay, so how many dimensions do you think there are? Do you think
Well,
we're in infinite dimensions? Do you because there's some interesting perspectives that if you were to take like a sheet of paper, that there's a bunch of different levels of sheet of paper, even though it's only like one plane of motion that that it exists in, right? But you could turn that paper up and down vertical and it would exist in a different plane, and that we can only see what we can see because we're limited by the plane that we're, and there's an infinite number of planes, and you can think of it as other planes, and maybe some other beings can exist on that plane and see us, and we can only see in like a say a two-dimensional world until the object moves a certain way, right? We can be deceived by our eyes of what really exists because of our perception. Sorry if this is getting too deep, but I love this kind of shit.
oh no, I'm just listening. Yeah. I personally would say that I can only experience four different dimensions as far as I know, or I can only prove that four different dimensions are real. So I guess that's all I can say.
Okay, yeah, no worries. And I kind of want to tie this back into Mark, because I know Mark was trying to go back to even getting in the topic of cryptocurrency. Um, in those relative terms, I love throwing the moon indicator up on a trading view chart and looking at the energy change in the market from a full moon to a new moon to a
Mm.
solar eclipse to a lunar eclipse, and how it affects the markets.
And the Mercury retrograde and all that.
Mercury
The
retrograde.
cycles of Venus. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even so far as looking and tying the numerology of, say, Bitcoin itself being tied to Saturn. Interesting stuff, I find personally for me.
Now, I'd be curious in learning what you mean by that, I guess.
So, if you were to type the ticker symbol BTC or Bitcoin into a cipher, right, and look at the numbers it spits out, and 21 would be one of those numbers. Well,
Well, that's pretty
ironically,
interesting.
what's the supply of Bitcoin? 21, right?
Right.
And you start looking at some of these things. And one of the gentlemen that I watched, and sometimes I share it in our Discord group, and I think a couple of the guys think I'm freaking nuts, but I find it fascinating where he starts tying in the Greek aspects of things, and Jupiter, Saturn, the symbology of some of the ticker symbols, and how they look like a 24, which would be tied to Jupiter, right, in symbolism, even so far as the color schemes chosen, and how they represent certain things, right? And you see a lot of banking institutions using blue and white color schemes, um, because of the representation symbolism behind it, and tying that all back in. And as so far as to look at certain Saturn influence tokens having different things happen to them on, say, a Saturday in the market, because we trade 7 days a week, right? So when you start typing some of these things in to the days of the week, and things like that, which
Another
leads me.
interesting anecdote to give you is that the latest like massive run up we've had in Bitcoin, if you actually look at the date of the eclipse we
Uh
had
huh.
this eclipse and it happened literally like right at the bottom, like tippity bottom, I thought was pretty interesting. And
Imagine
right.
that.
Right, it was pretty crazy. And also in April, we're gonna have a full solar eclipse.
Yep.
Or sorry, is it a lunar eclipse? It's when the moon,
Yep. April solar.
Yeah.
April solar. Okay, yeah. So it's right in front of the sun. It's gonna block out the sun completely. And it only happens once every like 70 years or something like that.
Interesting. 70s, the number seven again, a recycling number kind of thing. Or, yeah,
Yeah,
7 year cycles. Yeah, imagine that, how it all ties together.
I know. So so I would say that that it's always good to keep an open mind, and even if somebody's listening and they don't believe in any of the stuff that you're talking about, I would say, and I'm not saying that I necessarily do either, but but I always listen because there is something a little bit deeper where on full moons there's more murders, there's more births.
Yep.
Um and that's not just in humanity, that's also in the animal kingdom. There are real cycles going on around us that we don't that we don't necessarily comprehend unless we really dig deep and find out.
I think a lot of it is because we don't pay attention, you
Yeah,
know.
exactly. Right.
Yeah, yeah, and we're distracted by a lot of things in our world that keep us from understanding what's really going on around us at a deeper level. I feel like we become disconnected from that aspect, right? So,
Yes, to add to your point, while you're on that, I want to say that in the ancient Egyptian priests, which who also practiced science, believe s- excuse me,
mhm.
when they would experiment with uh, medicines, medications, whatever, they would take into account the time of year they administered them, which I thought was
Mm,
really interesting. And they
yeah.
had 32 decans, which are sort of like months, but like, obviously shorter. Um, and they believed that there would be different effects on your body depending on what time of year you'd give them. And I don't think that's something that we have in modern science that may need to be looked at. And
Mm,
it may also impact, a, the placebo effect, b, how sometimes you'll have these test runs of medications that have some totally different effect than when they test it the second time, the second trial, I should say. The first trial might look like a promising medication, and then all of a sudden they do a second trial and it's totally different. Maybe it had something to do with the time of year they administered it. I'm not pushing that argument, fully. I'm not a damn scientist, but I would say that, it needs to be looked at least.
yeah. Yeah, there's a so I have two kind of things that that came to mind while we've been talking, and we've been talking about these moon cycles, the solar and stuff, and we're actually entering into a solar phase, and Bitcoin tends to go on a price increase and discovery during solar phases rather than lunar phases. Um, and with that being said, how many months are actually in a year? Is it 10 or 12?
Well, I guess that depends on who you ask, right? But go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. I think so. Um, I think that our calendar has been manipulated to lead us astray from tying it back to astrology and these powerful things that we can really try to understand about the world that we live in. But um, I feel like I've hogged the mic long enough. I want to pass it back over to Mark or Leo, see if you guys have any questions and where you want to go from here, Mark. So I'll pass it back over.
Hey, cool, man. Yeah, I was quite keen to head into the direction of crypto and maybe trying that into some of your knowledge as well, so Optimus. So I was just wondering, who do you think Satoshi Nakamoto is? And do secret societies such as the Freemasons have anything to do with the creation of Bitcoin and subsequent technologies?
Oh, man. Well, I guess so. The first question, I guess, with Satoshi, I guess I would feel irresponsible to give who I believe is Satoshi. I strongly believe it's Satoshi, but I would point you to, without saying it, I would point you to find out who solved the Byzantine generals problem. Um, and you could pretty much work your way into Satoshi from there. But well, the second question was, how does masonry tie into crypto? Is that what it was?
Yeah, is there any relation? I guess what I'm asking is, did Bitcoin start organically, or is there some groups or organizations behind the forming of crypto Bitcoin? Yeah.
Oh, so that's interesting. Well, I would definitely say that Freemasonry has nothing to do with it, but there's definitely, I wouldn't say they're totally a coherent group, but I would say definitely a group of people, contributed to the project uh, in various ways. I think that the precursor to Bitcoin, people always say Bitgold or Hashcash, but I gotta push back against both of those strongly and say that if you want to see the true precursor to Bitcoin, look at Mojo Nation. And you might not have ever even heard that before, which I think is just bizarre. Like, I don't know why people don't even talk about that. But Bram Cohen, for example, worked with, so you guys might or might not know, Bram Cohen created BitTorrent back in the day, and n- um, so anyway, he was involved in the project in various ways. Also, there was people involved in what's it called, DigiCash or whatever it was called in the 90s that worked on Mojo Nation as well. Like I think, and I could be wrong about this, I think Zuko worked on it. I know Tim McCoy worked on it. Um, and actually, there's some conversations you can find with them and Nick Szabo about their issue with the economics of Mojo Nation's model, which essentially allowed anybody to so Mojo Nation had its own cryptocurrency called Mojo, and it hyperinflated, and that and so like that was why Mojo Nation failed, was that their currency hyperinflated. And so the real true first cryptocurrency, in my personal opinion, that implemented the solution to the Byzantine generals problem was Mojo. And since it hyperinflated, they sort of just like closed down the project and decided it never existed. And then they made Bitcoin, which, as lucky as we are, they made an economic model that was unbelievably great, opportunistic for us. Um, and that was almost altruistic to make it like in the way that they did. But they did realize that there had to be either a finite cap or some way to control that inflation. Um, and thankfully for us, they've made a finite cap. And as you can see in the price of Bitcoin, um, it basically turned Bitcoin into the best storage of value that humanity's ever seen and probably ever will see. And I think that people, when they talk about, oh, go look at the white paper, it says like, Bitcoin's supposed to be electronic cash, like, that's nonsense to me. Bitcoin is a wealth storage technology, and if you're looking at it as electronic cash, you're just talking nonsense. I mean, go use Cash App or whatever the hell these kids send each other money with these days. You don't need Bitcoin to send cash to each other. That's just nonsense. We've had bank wires, we've had credit cards, debit cards, etc. for a long time. We never needed any kind of digital cash in that sense. Um, Maybe Satoshi, and I say maybe, and I don't really believe this. Maybe Satoshi didn't take into consideration the economic effect of Bitcoin. I don't think that's true at all. But but I guess that might be the argument of these e-cash people. Um, yeah, I don't know if that answered your question. I'm rambling again. I could ramble for days.
Nah, cool, man. Yeah, it's very cool to get your perspectives on the history and who it could be. You did say there that you believe Bitcoin, is a store of value and probably the best we'll ever see. I know we were talking a little bit about this when we spoke about, I kind of like the narrative of where crypto's going, and it's like a fleeing to financial sovereignty and whatnot. And we kind of had a little bit of a debate on that. What do you see is going to happen, let's say, over the next 10 years with crypto?
As far as governance, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, governance. I guess when regulation comes in, do you see that it will fork into, I guess, regulated CBDCs, and then what we're doing with crypto will just sort of like remain on the outside of that, or do you see some integration? What's your views on where crypto is going to go?
Yeah, that's a good question. And a question that I don't have the answer to. It's hard to predict the government, and I would say that that one thing you can pretty much rely on with the government, or as far as the government goes, is its incompetence. Like, you can pretty much always bet on government incompetence. And and it's usually it's almost always a good bet. Um, and I would say that having that in mind, they might even understand that Bitcoin's a threat, but whatever they do, it's only gonna make Bitcoin, and this is gonna sound corny, but it's really only gonna make Bitcoin stronger as a storage of value, because if that's their goal, is to destroy it as a store of value, or to make people stop using it, they're only gonna do the opposite. Governments, they they're they're just ridiculous. Governments have done things even in the past 5 years that have surprised me, and I've always been pretty bearish on government. So um, I wouldn't worry about government as a threat to Bitcoin. I think that a lot of people do, and I think that it's getting loud again, I guess, that narrative, but it was actually loudest when I first got into Bitcoin in like 2013, and I would say that it got quieter and quieter over time because people realized that, like, the government doesn't really understand it. They never will, and even if they did, like, they move so slow that it's that it's like we don't really have to worry about it. Like, it's already unstoppable. First of all, it's decentralized. There's nothing at all they can do to stop us from using Bitcoin. I mean, if you look at China, they outright banned Bitcoin, and the Chinese market is as strong as ever in Bitcoin. So yeah, I think government's totally irrelevant.
Awesome. Hey, so Optimus, I've actually, just because we kicked off a little bit late due to my phone bugging, I've actually got to go and get ready to go to a meeting, but I know the guys will probably be keen to carry on and ask a few more questions, but thank you for joining us, man. And looking forward to chatting more, perhaps in some different spaces, and then getting you back at different times as the bull run evolves and get your views on things.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, man.
Actually, I have 3 questions for you. Number one, and Vince brought this up. Later on December, we have a full moon coming up. So I've heard quite a few people that the traders that do that expect quite a pump coming. Um, and then number two, um, you brought up philosophers like Aristotle and Socrates and all that stuff. And the one thing that you got to realize with a culture is that the next culture is going to have more tech than you did. So
Mm,
sometimes with your science and your thinking, you got to watch out because you may not know the truth because you don't have the technology. For an example, Aristotle, thought the world was flat. I mean, not the world was flat. They thought that the Earth revolved around that the sun revolved around the Earth,
hmm
and and because of the religion that believed them, they were like, well, that's what the law is and that's what the rule is. So they, a lot of people died because of that. But then when Copernicus and Galileo came up, they had the technology and they had some sort of political pull behind them, so they weren't killed. But then all of a sudden the culture changed, and now the Earth revolves around the sun.
Yeah. Different societies have different beliefs, I guess.
And then the third thing is going back to the plants thing. There was a lady that stood up in about in a sort of a meeting that we were in and said, you ever thought of taking your shoes off and walking around your house on your bare feet in your grass? Because she's like, the electricity that's in your body, the ground the walking on grass around your house grounds it and it needs electricity. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to start doing a test, like Fibonacci. So every day I did it. And I'm telling you, for 2 months, I kept records of stuff that was happening. and two things happened to my house. And I live in a new developmental area, so I know the houses around me. I'm the only house in this area that has mushrooms.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and mushrooms are means that you have a healthy grass,
Oh wow.
and then all the dandelions, which is like huge in my area. I don't have any on my lawn anymore. Um, and then the tree that I had, I found out what it was, and we had some storms for like a few weeks, and lightning bolts blasted my tree pretty much. Had to get it taken away. But ever since then, it's like my lawn has flourished because the tree was pretty much sucking the nutrients. It's one of those trees that was not good for your lawn.
Oh, right, right, yeah. It was it's like a grub, right?
Yep. So
Taking
it's
all the
like
resources from everything else.
yeah, and so the people that actually bought the area and started making, pick the trees that grow the fastest, but they're junk. You know,
Yeah.
and it's like, like when people had droughts, like in Missouri and Springfield area, major droughts during the summer, major. So everyone's like lawn is all brown and yellow, and mine's all green.
Yeah, that's interesting. Wow.
Yep. So it was pretty cool. I took pictures and recorded everything.
That's amazing, yeah. No doubt.
So I just wanted to share that. Oh, one more question. Is there a gender or race rule to enter the Freemasons?
Oh man, that's a good question. So there's a sister society to Masonry called the Order of the Eastern Star. And so if there are women that are interested in Freemasonry, they can go and join that uh, sorority. Um, a woman cannot be a Freemason. I know that probably doesn't sound good today, but that's the reality. But like I said, they can join the Order of the Eastern Star, which men cannot join. So,
Okay, and how about race?
oh, race. We welcome all races,
Okay.
all religions as well, as long as you believe in God, or the grand architect of the universe. One true God, as long as you're monotheistic.
And then Vince, brought up the idea where in some not dimensions or universe, but that there's beings like on this earth that you may see or whatever, and that's what I believe in. I believe in angels, so I believe in that.
Yeah, I don't think that would get in the way of Masonry if you're interested in Masonry at all.
Good stuff, guys. Yeah, I'm kind of tying it back to, these getting back to crypto and the moon cycles and its effect. It's interesting. As I pull up the moon phases, and it looks like we're coming up to a new moon on December 12th.
Mm,
And so a new moon would bring bullish energy into the market, right? So it's not an absolute, to my understanding. It doesn't happen like the day of, right?
yeah,
It is a window of energy, right?
it's like a
Um,
pendulum.
yeah. And then we go back to a full moon on December 26th, right after Christmas Day. So that's when we tend to see more
See
bearish
like the
energy in the
peak.
market.
Yeah.
So I find it interesting that right now we've had Bitcoin reach new microcycle highs, right? Right now it's pulling back, and ironically pulling back, and I hear a lot of analysts talk about it potentially, continuing to go up, which would fit right in with the narrative of bullish energy coming into the market for a new moon on December 12th.
I mean,
Uh,
I gotta agree with all that. I think that this pullback could last until maybe the 12th to the 15th, and then we'll see another rise between then and Christmas. Yeah, I can agree
hmm
with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you guys are doing any kind of technical analysis, you can always throw the moon cycle phases or the moon phases up on your chart. and kind of help you. I mean, it's quite honestly, I mean, you're not always going to see some huge swings in the market, but you'll definitely see the energy shift during these time frames for sure. Um,
And one thing that I do want to point out as well is that people do focus on halvings a lot, but when you think about it, um, Bitcoin inflation goes down on a curve. It does although the what do you call it? The halvings are a shock. There are that curve reduces the inflation or emission, I should say. People, they point that out like, oh, you can't say inflation, it's emission, whatever. So, so
hmm
I'm gonna call it inflation because that's what I do. So, anyway, there's like sort of like so since there's a curve in inflation, or I guess maybe you could say the reduction in inflation. Um, I don't remember where I was going with that. Oh yeah, so it might be worth it to like to consider that when you're looking at like 4-year cycles if you mark the halvings on a chart.
Now, are there what other kind of TA do you do a lot of your own technical analysis? Or what kind of style trader would you if you had to label yourself, what would you label yourself as in the market?
Um, hmm, that's a good question. Uh, well, I think the first thing that I understand and that I think anybody that's been in this space as long as I have would understand is that there's always better traders than me. And and it's good to take into consideration their opinions. And maybe hedge appropriately. I don't want to say like I'm just a holder, but what I mostly do is play spot. I usually think to myself like, okay, when's going to be the bottom of this, Bitcoin bear market, and I'm going to try to load up there. And then I realized, in Bitcoin bull markets, when is the hype ridiculous? Or is there a parabola? Parabolas are great because it's easy to get out at the top or near the top. For example, 2017 was a huge parabola. If you marked it on a chart, it's hard to explain without showing you like
Mm-hmm.
physically. But
Mm-hmm.
but if you're trading a parabola, it's very easy to get out at the top because you basically draw a trend line and it ends up looking like a big fan, going up into a parabola.
Mm-hmm.
So you pretty much know when it's nearing the top of the parabola and you can, get out appropriately there because you know that it's not going to go straight up forever. That's nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
Although, although I would say that if it's on an S curve, it's basically going to happen one day with hyperinflation. So you always want to make sure that you do own some Bitcoin. Even when you sell what you think is the top, don't sell 100% because that's how you die.
Mm-hmm.
Um, take the hit.
Ladder, basically ladder out.
Yeah, right. Take the hit. Don't ever have zero Bitcoin. That's more dangerous than having zero cash. Um, and it's so strange because when I watched Bitcoin go from $1,000 to $200, right? And I watched the chart, over the course of years. I told all my buddies in real life, and I'm sure you all that are listening have had this exact experience, um, because that's just crypto and that's just humanity. But you look at the chart and then you realize it gets down to a price that's so seemingly cheap that it's like, wow, I, I think it'd be good to recommend some of this to maybe my family or friends. And so I told all my friends when it hit to exactly $200. I told my friends like please like just buy one just in case. That's a couple nights of fun. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like that, $200 is not a big risk. And they all gave me the nonsense. Oh, it's a scam. Oh, blah blah blah. You don't know what you're talking about. Because when you're not rich, people don't listen to you. And which is the goofiest thing in the world because people who are rich are not hungry anymore. So like
Yes.
yeah, and so you'll see a lot of OGs talk about how they like following small accounts. And the reason why is because they're hungry. They're out looking for whatever the newest project is. And those kind of OGs who are humble enough to realize that the people coming into the market might know more than them about the market. Those are the ones who keep prospering, keep catching these new waves. Um, I would say I actually wanted to touch on this one little thing, which was that there are trends in the market um that might seem unpredictable, but if you really listen to those small accounts, they end up being more predictable. And I would say an example of this is when I entered in 2013. I thought, and like it is beginner's luck. I'm not gonna lie to you that maybe this is where beginner's luck comes from, but when I first heard of Bitcoin, I thought, oh wow, like Bitcoin pumps so high, like how am I gonna get in now? Like, oh, like what's gonna be the next Bitcoin? This is how most noobs think, what's gonna be the next Bitcoin? And so they're
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure out, so they look online, like, they're asking people whatever. So at the time I saw Litecoin, and actually I bought my first cryptocurrency, Litecoin, on eBay, which I think is kind of funny to tell people.
Wow.
Yeah, isn't that funny? So I bought, I want to say I bought 10 Litecoins or something like that. No, I bought $100 worth of Litecoin. I don't know how much it was, how many Litecoins, but anyway, I bought $100 worth of Litecoin, and that same week it went 10 times in 1 week. So it's just like
Wow.
the most bizarre thing, right? Like as you know, as like being in crypto for a long time, that's like unheard of, just to like hit that big like out of nowhere. So my $100 was worth $1,000, and I was like, wow, this cryptocurrency thing's great. Um, but anyway, what I was trying to say was that was during a time where people were experimenting with the economics of a token, where proof of stake had, I want to say Purecoin, which is the first proof of stake coin, had just come out, maybe in, I think I could be wrong with this. I think it came out in like mid 2013, and they also had coins like Freycoin, which I'm sure you never heard of it. Um, it's spelled FREI coin. Um, the interesting thing about that coin, which I don't think I've seen since, was that it had what's it called? What's it called? I don't remember the word. It's when it's like the opposite of inflation. It's not deflation necessarily. It's when there's a reduction in supply. So like basically, let's say you bought like 10 today, right? In like 2 years it might be 7 in your wallet,
That's
which
deflationary, right?
yeah, it's truly deflationary. But there's a word for it. And
Okay.
I can't remember what it starts with a D, but I can't remember what it is. Uh, which is super interesting. I didn't invest in that. It's not a good investable thing, but it is an interesting idea. And actually, if you look at the chart, it's actually been very stable. Like I want to say it's like 30 cents or something. I could be totally wrong about that. But it's actually been like really stable versus the dollar over like the last 10 years. Go ahead. Did you have a question?
You mean it's like a decaying token?
Yes, like a decaying token, which I thought was super interesting. But my point was that it did pump like when it first came out because it was something new, and
Mm-hmm.
that's I guess what I was trying to get into was that these new when people experiment with new tokens, that's where value comes from. If in That's where most value you can extract from an altcoin market comes from. Was Is that like initial excitement of a new technology, and a new wave. Like for example, like you can drop this in any kind of bubble. Like you can talk about Freightcoin, proof of stake back in the day. They also experimented with a coin called 42 coin, which was just like a supply of only 42 coins. And the reason was because they were like, well, if there's only 42 coins, then it's the rarest coin. Like, why wouldn't you buy this? Whatever.
I, I think I remember that too.
Yeah, right, right.
Yeah.
Because I think it was worth even more than a Bitcoin at one time, each one of the 42 coins. But even though it's nonsense, it still pumps like when it first comes out because it's like a new thing, an experimentation of some kind. And I'm not saying that everything's gonna pump when it comes out, but I'm saying that like, you know, it's a good place to look into new projects when they
Mm-hmm.
are experimenting with new things. Um, and then after that you had a wave of trying to remember. Oh, privacy tokens, like Dash came out, and actually when Dash came out, and I want to say in January of 2014, it was called Darkcoin. Um, People were intensely dogmatic. I mean, like it was bizarre to me because I thought like when I'd read into crypto, I was like, wow, like this sounds perfect. Privacy and Bitcoin sounds great. It wasn't total privacy. It was just like a coin join type deal, like a mixer. But at the same time, I thought like, oh, that's such a great idea. Like this sounds cool as hell. And I put a ton of money into it. Well, not a ton of money, but I mean like for me at the time, which I was,
Yeah.
I was I was just a poor like 20-year-old or whatever. I put like whatever money I could into dark coin, and it went like berserk. It went like it pumped like crazy until April, and that was where I got my first like I want to say I got like 10 bitcoins or something out of it. And but it struck me as like as how bizarre it was that people were so dogmatic and like so anti like that idea like in the
Hmm.
in the community. So that sort of gives you an idea of, and I'm sure you all have seen it with whatever altcoins you've been trading. You see the same sort of dogmatism, and how it's totally wrong a lot of the time, not all the time, but uh don't let that get to you. I mean, Solana is a perfect example in the modern era. People, especially Ethereum people, kept saying Solana is such trash, blah blah blah. When it was like $20 or whatever, and as you know, it pumped like the hardest this cycle, as far as like
Hmm.
the majors go. No,
Yeah.
obviously not the hardest, but um, and and so then you had like so you had the privacy coins. Monero ended up taking a long time to pump. It only pumped in like 2017, which seemed strange to me, but anyway, it pumped like an animal. Then you had, the smart contracts. Ethereum. Made Safe coin. You've probably not even heard of it if you entered recently. Made Safe coin was supposed to be like a competitor to Ethereum. It was supposed to be like a internet run by blockchain or whatever the hell. And I don't think that ever panned out. I think it was just vaporware. But it pumped alongside Ethereum when Ethereum first came out. Or not first came out, but first started pumping up. And so there was that wave. There's always a new wave. Then when there
Hmm.
was I think oh, then after that, I think it was DeFi. There's been waves in between, I'm sure, but there was DeFi, there was that big wave. There was the NFT wave. Um, the memes always have a wave in each cycle, and that's sort of something that's pretty reliable, um, because it doesn't necessarily require new technology or new experimentation. Um, but it
Do
does have to
you
be funny. Go
do you
ahead.
see in this next cycle of kind of like um I think some of the stuff that I'm seeing is gaming is like this new cycle. I mean, gaming's been there, but I think it's really, and maybe this is just because I'm paying closer attention, right? But
Oh,
um,
right, right.
seeing that gaming narrative really start to take hold in this particular cycle, along with um, AI driven things, right?
Yeah, yeah, those are excellent points. I think gaming, I think it's been having a wave, right? But I think that's a great wave to catch. The AI thing seems sort of gimmicky to me, but maybe it'll have its things. Ordinals is having a big wave. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Probably
Yep.
the biggest wave out of all of them. Um, BRC20 nonsense. I think it had a pullback recently after Luke, the Bitcoin dev, it funded the hell out of it, which I thought was pretty funny because there's nothing that Luke can do to change that. So if you're bullish on ordinals and BRC20 stuff, don't let that FUD, get you mixed up. If this is a dip that if you take what he said out of consideration and this dip looks good to you, go for it, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not giving any financial advice or anything, but I'm telling you that I'm going to be buying some when I think it's bottomed out. Um, eh, uh, so yeah, there's that as far as the wave goes. I think gaming, I haven't seen anything very impressive personally. I haven't done enough research on it to be honest with you. I haven't seen anything impressive as far as gaming goes. I'm sure there's probably something out there. But I'm sure that'll pump like crazy. There was a time when they had like Decentraland, like Mana, whatever,
Mm.
like
Yep.
digital like real estate bullshit that had a little wave.
Yep.
People like new things, investors like new things, and yeah, I think those are good waves to ride. I like I shilled nonsense on my freaking on this alt account, for example. I like DMT, the token, Dream Machine token. It's sort of like a mix. Yeah, it's sort of like a mix between like Friend Tech, which is another like sort of wave. It's sort of like a mix between Friend Tech and like OnlyFans and Twitch. I think they haven't really figured out where they want to go with it. Um, but there's so many different directions they can go with it, you know what I mean? But they're thinking about doing like a casino with it, stuff like that. So that's sort of like a gaming play that I'm doing. Um, yeah, let me see.
Well, every
Yeah.
time I look at a DMT chart, I taste this funny taste in my mouth.
Like a bad taste or
You were talking earlier about, the association of sometimes when you
oh,
see something and tasting it, and if anybody's,
synesthesia.
yeah, if anybody's ever done DMT, it does have a distinctive taste to it.
Yeah, I had my phase. I my friends used to freebase DMT back in the day before, so I've freebased DMT one time, to be honest with you. And I didn't get like a really strong trip, but yeah, it definitely did have a taste, like you said.
Yeah, yeah. Very, very intense visual. I experienced shapes and colors. Um, I think it helped. You know, I even went so far as make sure that the room was completely dark, right? Because I
Oh
didn't want
yeah.
to be influenced by any external stimuli. When
You'll
you're,
also trip much harder in the dark than in the
yeah.
light.
And my wife was actually playing a, Tibetan bowl, singing bowl at the same time. So
Interesting.
you have this mixture of colors and shapes moving in this sound. So
Right.
it's quite an experience. Now, since we've kind of gotten on this subject, what are your thoughts on ayahuasca?
Ayahuasca. So that sounds like a painful trip. But I do want to say something that's similar to ayahuasca, in as far as the purging goes. Uh, and
And
this
you do
ties
purge.
into oh
You do
yeah,
purge.
oh yeah. So this ties into what we were talking about, plant physiology. So there's this. So I don't know if you ever heard of what's it called? Oh my God, I'm losing my damn words because I'm on live. But the
Just
datura.
picture the audience naked out there, and it's all good. That
Oh,
helps with
that's a good thought. Yeah, I'll
communication,
do that.
right?
Anyway, so datura, which is the first poison uh, that I want to say that's like documented or something in humanity, which is a moonflower. So I don't know if you ever heard of a morning glory. So
Yes.
there's like a vine with heart-shaped leaves, right? And there's one version of this vine called a moonflower or datura that uh its flower opens at nighttime, which is really interesting. And so if you extract the chemicals from the seeds of the datura plant, um you can make poison with it, and so it'll kill you if you take it. Um there's a plant that's almost the same. It's a vine with heart-shaped leaves, and it looks the same too, the exact same, and it's called a moonflower. And the difference is that it opens during the daytime. And if you extract those seeds, you actually get um, LSA, which your body turns into LSD when you extract it with water or distilled water, I should say. And the ancient Mayans used to do this, and like ancient Mayan priests and stuff. So if you drink that water, then you can trip, and like I said, you'll purge if you do enough of it. Um, LS,
Do you feel that purging, either through your own personal experience or research? I mean, is the purging actually a good thing?
oh, that's a really interesting question. I don't know how to answer that. I don't have an answer to that question, unfortunately. Um, I would say that I definitely did purge like a mother effer
Yeah.
when it did happen.
Because like you said, if you think of plants being medicinal in nature, right? It could be good or bad, right? It could be that fact that it's detoxing the body, and the body is saying, "Look, this plant is trying to cleanse the body," right? Or is it just a bad reaction to it, right? I
Yeah.
work in medicine and healthcare, and many of the drugs that are on the market are derived from plant.
Well,
You
yeah,
know,
maybe even most of them, right? Like
correct.
Tylenol comes from I think it's what, or
White
not
bark,
Tylenol.
white bark, or
Yeah,
something like that.
right, right.
Yeah,
And ibuprofen comes from like what, the iboga plant or something like that they call it.
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
Yeah, but they all come from plants, or mostly, I should say. Obviously, there's synthetic things too. Um, what was your question? Oh yeah,
Well,
so I would say with my experience, which was interesting, I probably took way too much of it because I didn't know what I was doing and I was young. Yeah. So I so I purged multiple times, right? And I probably purged 5 times. And the very last time, it was just pure water that went through my chest, and it felt incredible. It felt like nice and cool, and it wasn't like a burn. Like it felt literally good. I I wouldn't go out and recommend it.
yeah, but
But
I find it, so, you know, with some of the personal stories I've heard from people that do or have gone and participated in ayahuasca. That it is a medicinal process, right? And there's
mm,
actually a ritual leading up
mm.
to it, if you were to do it appropriately, where your diet needs to be clean, um, you're hydrated, you even go so far as to abstain from sexual activity prior to this. There is a purging process to it, that the body is cleansing from this medicine. And some of the stories that have been shared with me is that um, there's this mystical side of it as well, right? Where there's this connection to Mother Nature, being able to communicate with animals, and symbolism that appears to you. Um, and some people are obviously have reported, I understand things at a very deeper level, and maybe this is where it not only does it cleanse the body, but maybe it cleanses the mind. you know
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned the word ritual, and I do want to say that this sort of ties into Freemasonry as well. So there was a study that came out, I don't remember, maybe a few years ago, where they discovered the that they were trying to figure out why the placebo effect happens. And so one theory was that maybe it happens because we're doing the ritual of taking medication, and like it sort of activates
hmm
something subconsciously, right?
hmm
So they did the experiment where they had people just do the process of taking a pill but not actually taking a pill. So they didn't even take a placebo. And what they found was they still had the placebo effect. So that theory seemed to be true. So it appears as though ritual really is important on some deeper level, maybe a metaphysical level, maybe a subconscious level.
hmm
Um, and so I was talking to Mark how about how a Masonic initiation, and there's also many rituals, but um, those rituals might, you know, might direct your thinking or might have some sort of deeper effect on you. Maybe it's an ancient science that we don't know much about today, or
hmm
don't have another way to access without such a thing. The
yeah,
ritual of
yeah,
initiation, the science
yeah.
behind it.
There's one ritual that really comes to mind that affects a lot of people, and I think that's a ritual of exchanging of rings and vows.
Oh, that's interesting. Absolutely, absolutely, yeah, definitely. That's such a good point. Yeah. There's so
um,
many rituals like that, that make people happy. The ritual of decorating a tree or making a cake for someone's birthday or
yeah,
blowing out candles. There's so many rituals that we still do that really do they really are meaningful. You get some sort of feeling from it that you don't get anywhere else, you know.
So being and I, when people hear the word or the term ritual, they could have a negative connotation
Mm,
to that, or a thought process, and I would challenge them to really put that aside, from the standpoint of, instead of looking at things as black and white, or hot or cold, or good or bad, thinking of them from the mindset of, they just are, they just exist, and quit trying to label that, because then you're creating a dichotomy by doing that, right? And just kind of be in the present, and something is there, it exists, because I can do a ritual, and I can make it good or I can make it bad by my intention, if
mm,
that makes sense.
mm-hmm.
And I think that's where sometimes we have to put things aside and really take a step back, and change the perspective of which we look at it, and just appreciate it for just what it is, and it just exists.
I think that ties in great. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Leo, I know, I feel like we could probably go on for a long time, but I want to be respectful of your time. And I do appreciate you coming in and chatting with us, because, man, I find this stuff super fascinating. Um, Going back to the whole, um, is the earth flat or round, or is it just toroidal, actually?
Are you asking or?
I'm just posing a hypothetical, question scenario, maybe,
So I saw
Um,
this excellent graphic, right, of like our solar system moving through the universe, and it was much it was an excellent graphic because basically like the sun's leading the way, and behind it there's like a, what do you call it? How do you say it? Like, you know, when like you drive by something really fast with your car, and like
yeah,
you get that wind from behind it, the little wind tunnels,
yeah,
or like
yeah.
an
It's like
airplane.
you can draft,
Yeah,
essentially.
draft is, yeah. So like that draft from the sun is what makes all our planets rotate. Um, uh, uh, and that was the graphic really, which I thought was super interesting. Because that's sort of like what it is. Maybe it's not, you know, not totally scientific, but it was very interesting to see. Um, and
So let me throw this one at you.
mhm.
What if this world that we are living in is a matrix of our own construction? We've
Oh, so like the
we've
Matrix theory, like
well well well. Okay, so from a medicinal standpoint, from a healthcare standpoint, we look at the body and we say, okay, we have bones, we have muscles, we have a nervous system, and the nervous system is how we perceive our environment. Correct? That's how we look, touch, taste, smell. Right? What if it's not? What if it's not what allows us to perceive our environment, but actually filters what we can see from our environment?
mm.
Haha.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. I think the latter is the more accurate idea.
Because you if you look at, say, what we call schizophrenia, right? Somebody who's had maybe a nervous system issue, a traumatic brain injury, right? TBI or something, where the nervous system becomes unfiltering, then, where we think they're crazy because they can see things that we don't see, but maybe it's because they're actually there,
Mm.
and their filtration system now is defunct, allowing them to perceive these things that are actually there, of which we cannot see because we think we're normal.
You would love the Corpus Hermeticum. That's all I can say from that. You would absolutely love it, and you would love the Kybalion too, which is sort of like a summary of the Corpus Hermeticum with modern language. So I would recommend you go and explore the Corpus Hermeticum. And
Okay,
I
I
guess
wrote it. I wrote it down.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess
I've written a few of these down that we've discussed because I do find this thing. I find the thing that's most interesting about it is challenging my own perception. Right?
yeah, I
What
think you're
is
very much in line with metaphysics. And the corpus sort of touches on metaphysics, and it does it in like sort of a coded or allegorical way. Um, yeah. So I guess that's a good point to like end, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming up. I'm glad Mark brought you on. And, I love getting into some of these deep conversations and learning from different perspectives. And I think that sometimes, um, we talk about in our spaces about, having conversations and not always agreeing necessarily with what people have to say, but, um, the whole point of having the conversation and being able to have that conversation is what's important, right? um, and not censoring, um, the ability to have this conversation even when you disagree with somebody. I think that
Absolutely.
it's a lost art in today's day and age of having these, because I think you can start to put yourself into a bubble by not being open minded to the fact that, you know, things may not be as they appear, right? So, and the eyes can easily be deceived. I mean, if you look at magic with a C, we can deceive through, hands and things like that. Now,
Mm.
now, that does lead me. What is the distinction then between magic with a C and magic with a K?
Well, hmm. Magic with a CK, I would say is a I mean,
Without,
I'm gonna
I
end
don't
up
want you to get.
rambling for like an hour and a half. Magic with a CK, I would say, is sort of like the scientific version of the s- the psychology and the study of memetics, symbology,
Okay, so
allegory.
so then,
It's such a hard thing to summarize, man.
sure. So why would they take, and then why would we rephrase it with magic without the K?
Oh,
What would
so
be the lost knowledge behind maybe taking away the K and its meaning, then be
oh,
by
so
restructuring it in a different form like that,
I guess the best way I could answer your question is to give you examples, and you'll know what I mean. Well, I think. I
Okay.
think you'll know what I mean. Um, I think in our modern era, and I actually dislike him, but I think in our modern era, the best magician, without a doubt, hands down, is Elon Musk. And I don't like him, you know.
Is that because he can make advertising dollars disappear?
Could be. But you see the entrancing effect that he imposes on so many people, and he just remains the center of attention. He is just a phenomenal magician, um, and he does
Ah,
it with memetics, really, um, and all kinds of psychological tricks. Uh, he says many things that he doesn't necessarily believe, but all of that is magic, with a CK. So I would
mm,
say I would say, so he's the best modern example I could give. I could give some other historical examples, and this is gonna be quite contentious. So, prepare your, how do you say it? This is a trigger warning, right?
okay.
Historical magicians might include Muhammad, Jesus, um, John the Baptist, Moses, uh, even people, I would say, yeah, Socrates, definitely Plato. I think Plato was a excellent magician and also a bad person. Um, I could go on about that for hours also.
Mm,
Aristotle, of course, obviously. He was also, you might not know this, he was an advisor to Alexander the Great who ended up conquering all the way to Afghanistan. Um, And so the power of his magic is absolutely undeniable. Aristotle. So yeah,
We
yeah.
we
So
we may have to have you back for another space then, so we can kind of dig into some of this because I find it, you know, if you think about even our choice of words are magical, right? And how
yes,
they
yes,
can
exactly.
pose feelings.
The
Not only.
colors that companies use, you touched on that. The
Mm-hmm.
colors that companies use, you might learn in a marketing class, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that is magic with a CK in the traditional sense. So it's sort of interesting that modern education sort of touches upon it without calling it, what we traditionally used to call it. A lot of it is included in the psychology field. Yeah, so you
Mm-hmm.
get where I'm coming from there, I think.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. All righty, man. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna call it a night there, because I feel like we could keep going down a rabbit hole with this, and so to speak. And
Right.
but I love the conversation, and because I think it 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 bears thinking, right? To hook the mind into a process of asking questions, and I think even that in itself, right? When I teach a class, I tend to ask lots of questions to the class to get them to engage, right?
Right.
And in a way, that's kind of like what you're talking about with Elon, right? In how you, because you do notice, his body language when he speaks. He'll pause and choose his words.
Yep, yep, yep. It's
Uh,
very calculated.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that goes. But anyway, all right, we'll save that for another space, man. And so thank you very much for joining us tonight, man. I'm glad Mark got us connected, and maybe we'll get another space going and I'll have a plethora of questions for you that we can discuss. But again, Leo, is there anything that you would like to lead us with as far as any last statements or anything?
No, I'm good. Just thanks a lot for coming over, and thanks. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you all. I really appreciate you guys having me. I've had a blast. I think this was a great conversation.
Yeah. And I'll leave it with this last kind of shameless shill, so to speak, with this whole magic internet money thing. And we definitely like to do that here at Dog Face Labs and Zero Mining, because obviously we can put miners online and make magic money, off the internet, right? So if you guys are interested in that, you can click through my PFP, join our Discord. We love to have some see inside our Discord, have you ask some questions if you're considering mining as a revenue source, rewards in your portfolio and your thesis of investment. We'd be happy to see you inside our Discord. But other than that, thank you everybody who has joined us this evening. We appreciate you being here and giving us some of your attention. And thank you. Appreciate it. All right, Optimus, you have a wonderful evening. Thank you again so much. I super appreciate it.